So last night, many of us geeked out about Pedro Pascal being cast in Wonder Woman 2. But now that it's the morning after and our fan goggles have faded away, it's time to get real, both about who he's likely playing and if it really is a good idea to cast him in the sequel. So first, his role is indeed top secret, but nevertheless, I think I figured out who he's playing. Now, when the news first broke, many of you had excellent guesses on Twitter. My favorite guesses of yours being Hades and Vandal Savage. I was like, ooh, I'd be happy with either one of those. Beyond happy, thrilled. Then I thought, well, what are some other good guesses? He could be playing Hermes, Orion of the New Gods, a human agent working with Diana in the 1980s. It could be that simple. Maybe even the god Kartaga. Boy, that's going to be hard to say in the movie. Maybe they can give him a nickname. But that's the god who's responsible for turning Dr. Barbara Ann Minerva into Cheetah. But as I looked for options, I stumbled across the obvious one, and that is Deimos. Now, who is Deimos? Well, Deimos is the son of Aphrodite and Ares. Ooh, apparently revenge is a dish best served during the Cold War. And on that note, in the comics, Deimos tried to incite a war between the United States and the Soviet Union, which, is just what Wonder Woman 2 is about. And I do like the idea of Diana going up against another child of the gods. Plus, that's a good way to get around Ares having killed all the originals in the first film, right? It works. It works actually really well. And yes, you're seeing that picture correctly. Deimos sometimes does have snakes for hair, rocking the Medusa style. Talk about 80s hair, right? Plus, Deimos and his brother Phobos hang out in the underworld sometimes, where I think we all suspect Steve Trevor is currently hanging out. Well, it's back in time, but that's where we think he ends up, of course, after the first film. And I've heard from several sources that Steve is indeed returning for the sequel, so maybe another god wants to throw a monkey wrench in the situation, as they do love to do that. And maybe that will give us a love triangle for at least part of the movie. I can totally see that. All right, so story-wise, this is looking pretty solid. I don't know how Cheetah's going to factor into all this. I mean, you would think Cheetah would be the main bad, and maybe I don't know, maybe she is, and Deimos will be a behind-the-scenes situation. Although they already did that with Ares, you think Diana would be wise to that plan by now. She's like, go and check the politicians first. All right. So anyway, as to whether or not he's good to cast in the film. Well, creatively, I think yes. And as one of you pointed out, I thought this was great. He's pretty darn good with a lasso himself, so that would be hilarious. They could have a lasso off. Plus, I think he seems like a very good fit with Gal Gadot herself. There's two actors. And fans always do enjoy his work, including on Game of Thrones, which gives him quite the pop culture credibility stamp. But let's be honest with ourselves. As good as he is, so far Pedro Pascal cannot sell tickets. Kingsman 2, I think his biggest role to date, both in terms of the project and his screen time, barely cracked the century mark stateside and had to rely even more heavily on its overseas box office than the first film did. They ended up, though, at about the same level box office-wise. Although Wonder Woman was soft overseas, so maybe Pedro Pascal will help in that department. I'm being very kind, assuming that he was what helped it overseas. I don't think so. I think it was the franchise and the idea of Kingsman and the original cast. But maybe his agent was able to sell that in the room. Although we'll talk about Pedro Pascal and Patty Jenkins' connection in just a moment. He thinks he didn't need a hard sell. And then, as another one of you tweeted, though, Pedro Pascal and Kristen Wiig is seeming very TV-like. And it does indeed seem like the sequel is lacking in star power. But then again, the first Wonder Woman didn't exactly have a lot of star power. As much as we all love Chris Pine, he's actually a similar situation where, for the most part, his movies don't do well either. And Wonder Woman 2 did very well at the box office anyway. And maybe it's Gal who is the draw, which I can totally see. And maybe bigger names, maybe we're not seeing what's really happening here. And that's just like we're talking about behind the camera. In front of the camera, they can't get any bigger names to join the DCEU right now, even for its crown jewel. They're like, yeah, I'll be in Wonder Woman 2, but then you might force me to be in another DCEU movie. So that could be very much the situation. And this might be the best that they can get. Although, with Wonder Woman 2, suspiciously, Everyone is a friend of Patty Jenkins, who's joining the sequel. Pedro Pascal, they've worked together, they're pals. Kristen Wiig was her idea, which she pushed very hard, and many of us have problems with. We just don't see it, Patty. And then also, she infamously, in my opinion, got rid of, I think this is an infamous move, got rid of Alan Heinberg and replaced him with a writer friend of hers. Warner Brothers is placing an awful lot of faith in a woman who didn't make the first movie all by herself. She even admitted she would never have cast Gal Gadot. I don't know why she would admit that. That seems ridiculous to me. But thank goodness she wasn't in charge of casting Wonder Woman. I hope we won't be saying, I wish that someone else had cast the rest of these roles. We'll have to see if that faith is well placed. Although, you know what happens when you take on full responsibility for a project? Robert Downey Jr. learned that the hard way. And I think Ryan Reynolds, Deadpool 2, while I think it looks good, is projected to open about $30 million less right now than the first Deadpool. So, all right, so what do you think of the Pedro Pascal casting and how Wonder Woman 2 is coming together? Do you think he's Deimos? I think that's a really solid guess. All right, write your thoughts down below. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.